Everyone. Today we are going to discuss When the Assault Was Intended to the City, which is a sonnet written by John Milton, the great English poet after William Shakespeare. And this sonnet is prescribed on the syllabus of BA first year pass course English Literature for Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur, Rajasthan. Let's first talk about John Milton. John Milton was born in 1608 and he died in 1674. And as a poet, he was active during Caroline Age and Commonwealth period. Caroline Age was a period, the reign of King Charles I, and he was the King of England from 1625 to 1649. And Commonwealth period means the period in English literature from 1649 to 1660, and after the death of Charles I, which was actually an execution, which we are going to just discuss. Commonwealth period, it is also called Puritan interregnum. Now, what is meant by Puritan interregnum? During the reign of King Charles I, there was tension between Charles I, the King of England, and House of Commons, means Parliament, the Parliament of England. The Parliament of England wanted to restrict the powers of King Charles I and wanted more freedom and more democracy for the people of England, and another cause was the Puritan movement. The Puritanism in England, it was a movement in the 16th and 17th century movement, and it was led by some Orthodox Christians in England for purifying the Church of England and implementing severe and strict moral and orthodox religious order in England. They viewed the state of England at that time as morally debasing, and they wanted to correct it. And there was rampant corruption also in English politics at that time, about which John Milton talks about in his elegy on the death of his friend Edward King. The title of that elegy is Lycidas, in which by the term blind mouths he means the corruption of the clergy, of the religious preachers and leaders of that time. So a war broke out in England, which is called English Civil War. It started in 1642 and it remained till 1651, and it was a series of violent political conflicts between Cavaliers and Roundheads. Cavaliers or Royalists, they were on the side of the King Charles I. They were the courtiers of King Charles I, and there were courtiers and soldiers and officials. They supported the king. They supported the royal order. They were for monarchy. So they were called Cavaliers or Royalists. On the other hand, in sharp contrast to that, there were some people, some officials, soldiers, and parliamentarians who supported Oliver Cromwell and the Puritan movement. They were called Roundheads. So the political conflict, the violent conflict between them culminated in the beheading of Charles I in 1649. Charles I was captured, and the parliamentarians, the Roundheads, they executed Charles I in 1649, and they abolished monarchy, means the royal order, and they established Commonwealth. They established a Commonwealth government which was headed by Oliver Cromwell, But then in 1658, after the death of Oliver Cromwell, the political system again collapsed, and in 1660 again monarchy was restored by the arrival of Charles II, who was the son to Charles I. He came back from France and he ascended the throne of England, and again monarchy was restored. So this was the end of Cromwellian era, and John Milton was a supporter of Puritan movement. He was a supporter of Oliver Cromwell, and he was also an important politician and official during the reign of Oliver Cromwell in England. And so that is why when the restoration came, when the monarchy was restored, he was in danger. John Milton was in danger. But it is during the Civil War, during the period of Civil War, that the sonnet, When the Assault Was Intended to the City, was written. And so the literary history which and the political history which I have discussed with you, it has been done by me because it stands to a reason, because the sonnet, When the Assault Was Intended to the City, is historically related to this political conflict in England, the English Civil War. So now John Milton was proficient. He was a very learned poet, and he was very much conscious of this fact, very much conscious about his about his learning ability, and he was a proficient poet. He was proficient in various European languages, including English, Latin, and Italian. And he was a voracious reader and a classical scholar. He knew classical languages like Latin and Greek, and he was a brilliant prose writer. And during the Civil War, he wrote a lot of prose writings. He wrote a lot of essays and pamphlets. Areopagitica, his book, which came out in 1644, is a collection of his pamphlets, including his seminal prose writings on freedom of the press and of education, which was, of course, written in 1644. And in 1651, he lost his eyesight because of his habit of excessive reading. And we know that it was a time when there was no electricity, and at night, if you have to read, then you will have to use candles and lanterns for reading. So because of his excessive reading during nights, he lost his eyesight, and after which he dictated his writings to his relatives. And he is known for his sublime grand style. His style of writing is called grand style because he wrote in a Latinized English, in a polished and elevated English, in very formal English. So that is why he is known for his grand style. And because we can see a clear effect of ancient Greek and Latin writings on Milton's writings. And he was very religious by nature, and a strong devout Christian personality can be seen in Milton. It can be perceived in Milton. He had a great religious Christian zeal, and Puritan intellectualism in his poetry and writings can be seen. You can take his simplest of the poems and you can see that how religious he was. For example, On His Blindness, that sonnet expresses his belief in God. The poet there is is in great distress that he has become blind. He has gone blind. But at the end of the sonnet, he expresses his gratitude and his faith in God, his strong faith in, his unwavering faith in God, that if he has lost his eyesight, it must have been some reason. God must have some kind of design, and it is God's will, and he will follow God's will. He will not question it. So there is an unwavering faith in God and confidence in the human soul for regeneration and salvation, which can be seen in his poetry. Among his major works are El Allegro, Il Penseroso, these two poems were published in Poems, a volume of poems by John Milton in 1645, and Comus, It Was a Masque, which came out in 1637, and in the same year he wrote Lycidas, a pastoral elegy which he wrote on the death of his friend Edward King, who was with Milton at Cambridge University. And the elegy was actually published the following year in 1638, and as we have already discussed, Areopagitica came out in 1644, a collection of his prose writings, and Paradise Lost, his seminal work, his most celebrated epic poem. It came out in 1667, in which he talks about the fall of man, and there are several moral issues and different things which he has written in this poem, and the character of Satan, which he has sketched in words, through words in this poem, has been much critically discussed through the ages since he wrote the poem. And the same after some years, in 1671, came its sequel, Paradise Regained. It was a sequel to Paradise Lost, in which he talks about the arrival of Christ and the overpowering of Satan by Jesus Christ. And the same year came Samson Agonists. It was a tragedy in which he writes about a biblical character and his tragedy, Samson. Now let's read the poem. When the assault was intended to the city, captain or colonel or knight in arms, whose chance on these defenseless doors may seize, if deed of honor did thee ever please, guard them, and him within protect from harms. He can requite thee, for he knows the charms that call fame on such gentle acts as these, and he can spread thy name over lands and seas. Whatever clime the sun's bright circle warms, life, lift not thy spear against the Muse's bar. The great Emathian conqueror bid spare the house of Pindarus, when temple and tower went to the ground, and the repeated air of sad Electra's poet had the power to save the Athenian walls from ruin bare. So as we can see that when the assault was intended to the city is a sonnet, is a Petrarchan sonnet, which has been written in first 8 lines and last 6 lines, means in octave and sistit. So as far as the historical background to this sonnet is concerned, this sonnet was written in 1642, probably on November 12. The heading given above is in the Cambridge manuscript in Milton's handwriting, but this heading does not occur in editions of 1645 and 1673. because this poem had another heading, which was on his door when ye city expected an assault. But now we have this poem with the heading when the assault was intended to the city. So in 1642, Milton, already known as a strong parliamentarian, as we have already discussed, that he was a Puritan and he was a supporter of Oliver Cromwell. So he was a parliamentarian and he sided with the Roundheads, and he was living in his house in Aldersgate Street in London with his two nephews, whom he was educating at that time. And the civil war had already commenced, and in November, London was threatened by the advance of the King's army. The King's army was heading forward to London, and all the Roundheads, all the supporters of Oliver Cromwell were threatened because they were going to be attacked by the King's army. So Aldersgate Street was at that time outside the city gates. So Milton was in proximity to the King's army. So at that time, he might have thought of writing this poem, this sonnet, in order to appeal to the English army, in order to appeal to that potential soldier or armed official, that he spare Milton's house, and it is through this poem, through this sonnet, is requested that his house was not attacked, may not be attacked by the English army. So the sonnet, when the assault was intended to the city, carefully follows the Petrarchan model in the development of the subject. The first quatrain simply expresses a request to the Cavalier officers to spare the poet's house and protect the poet. And the second quatrain promises a poet's reward for such a chivalrous deed. So here comes the important pause at the end of the octave, that is the climax of the poem. After this, nothing really new is added. The request and the promised reward are simply enforced by two examples from history which form the street, which we are going to discuss in this poem. So as far as some words, difficult words which the poet has used in this poem, some terms are concerned, let's discuss them. Requite. Requite means showing love, kindness, favor to someone in return for their help or favor to you. If somebody has helped you, has favored you, you also feel a sense of obligation towards them. So what do? That you requite it. You give back. And charms. Charms here means poetic powers. Milton was a very conscious poet. He was conscious of his talent, poetic talent. So he talks about his poetic powers, and he says that with the help of his poetic powers, he can celebrate that soldier, that official who spares his house, who will spare his house, who will not harm his house. So he will celebrate that soldier through his poems, through his poetic power. Gentle acts here means the act of safeguarding the poet's house. The poet requests that his house be safeguarded by, even if the poet is an opponent of the royal army, but because he is a poet, because he is an artist, so he should be spared. He should not be harmed, because it is a matter of honor. It is a matter of giving honor to a poet. So he can spread thy name over lands and sea. Here Milton means that he can communicate to all world that armed officer's act of kindness of sparing the poet's house, that if that soldier or that armed official saves him, spares him, does not harm him, then he will celebrate that poet's act of kindness through his poem. Climb means climate. Lift not thy spear against the Muse's bar. Milton makes a reference to his own house as dedicated to the Muses, because he dedicated his life to the cause of literature, to the cause of classical learning. So he considers his house as a dedication towards the Muses. The 9 Muses in classical mythology were the daughters of the supreme god Zeus, and they are the patrons of different, they are considered as patrons of different kinds of arts and sciences. The great Emathian conqueror Alexander, as we know about him, that he was from Macedonia and he was a Macedonian emperor, and he is said to have conquered the whole world, and he was born in Emathia in Macedonia. That is why he has been referred to as Emathian conqueror. So while capturing the city of Thebes in 335 before Christ BC, he destroyed everything, but he did not destroy that house in which once Pindar was born. Pindar was a great lyric poet of Greece. He was born in Greece, and he was born in that house 200 years previous to Alexander's conquest. So when Alexander came to know about this fact that he was born in that house, so Alexander, out of respect for Pindar, out of respect for a poet, for a great poet, Alexander did not destroy that house. He spared that house. So it shows the magnanimity of a king. It shows how Alexander had a sense of respect for poets and writers and artists. And the repeated air of sad Electra's poet had the power to save the Athenian walls from ruin bare. In ancient Greece, there were two nation states. One was Sparta and another was Athens. So there was a political conflict between Spartans and Athenians. The Spartans were physically more powerful than the Athenians, and the Athenians were intellectually more superior to the Spartans. The Spartans defeated the Athenians in 404 BC, but they spared the city of Athens and did not destroy it. When they heard a chorus from Euripides' tragedy Electra, so it moved them, that the chorus, the song of Euripides' tragedy Electra moved them, and they spared the city of Athens and did not destroy it. When the assault was intended to the city, captain or colonel or knight in arms, the poet here requests that armed official. He might be a captain, he might be a colonel or a knight, whose chance on these defenseless doors may seize. The poet says that if perchance you have come to the doors of my house, and if you have this opportunity of destroying this house, attacking this house, because this house is the house of a parliamentarian, of a supporter of the parliament, of a supporter of Oliver Cromwell. So if you have got the opportunity of destroying this house, whose chance on these defenseless doors may seize, if deed of honor did the ever please, guard them, and him within protect from harms. Then I request that official, that captain or colonel or knight, that because this house is the house of a poet, this house is the house of an artist. So, and it is a matter of great honor. It is a matter of great pride and magnanimity that the soldier or that captain, colonel, knight, that he spares this house, because it is a regal duty, or we can say that it is an honorable work for a person to save an artist, to save a scholar. Guard them. So these doors must be guarded. These doors should be guarded by that soldier, by that official. These doors should not be attacked. And him within protect from harms. And that poet, him is used for Milton himself. And him, protect Milton. Protect him. Do not harm him. Do not inflict any harm to him. Because he is a poet. He can requite thee. And if you protect him, he will give you back what you will give to him. If you spare him, he will give you respect, and his respect towards you will be reflected, will be manifested in his poems, in his poetry. For he knows the charms that call fame on such gentle acts as these. He has the ability to write poems, to such poems which can travel far and wide, which can reach all the world, all over the world. And he will give you a mark of respect in his poems. And he can spread thy name over lands and seas, and your name, O soldier, or captain, or colonel, or knight, your name will spread. Your fame will spread to different countries. It will travel far and wide. Whatever clime the sun's bright circle warms, it doesn't matter whatever the climate might be in those particular regions. Lift not thy spear against the Muse's bar. Bar, B-O-W-E-R, bar. It means garden. This house is the garden of the Muse of poetry. This house of Milton is dedicated to the Muse of poetry. This house is dedicated to the cause of literature and learning and scholarship. So please, do not lift your spear against this house. Do not harm this house. Do not inflict any harm to this house. The great Emathian conqueror bid spare, because once Alexander the Great Macedonian king, spared the house of the Greek poet Pindar. Alexander did not harm his house when he came to know that once in this house was born and lived a great poet Pindar. So even after conquering that city, even after conquering the city of Thebes, Alexander spared the house of Pindar. At that time, when every temple and every tower went to the ground, every temple and every tower was being dismantled by Alexander's army. And the repeated air of sad Electra's poet had the power to save the Athenian walls from ruin bare. Another example is also from Greece, when Spartans and Athenians were fighting together, and when Spartans conquered Athenians. And when they heard a chorus, a song from the play, from the tragedy Electra, which was written by Euripides, the great tragic playwright, dramatist of ancient Greece. When they heard a chorus, a song from Euripides' play Electra, Euripides' drama Electra, they stopped destroying the city of Athens. They spared the city of Athens out of respect for Euripides and out of respect for art and literature. So in this sonnet, John Milton not only requests his opponents to spare his house and spare his life, but also the idea of literature has been celebrated in this sonnet. Literature and all other arts, all other literary arts or arts related to literature or similar to literature, artistic activities, they have been celebrated, they have been given honor by John Milton. That the people related to the literary arts and artists, writers, scholars, they should not be attacked by governments, because it is they who write for people, and it is they who defend the rights, the democratic rights of the people of a country or a place. And it is those artists who blossom the minds and hearts of people by their wisdom, by their knowledge, by their learning. So literature has that power, literature has that honor, that it should be respected, and that literature deserves a mark of respect. Even if there is a violent battle between two opponents, they should spare each other's writers, scholars, and artists. They should spare their libraries, each other's libraries, because sparing it is a mark of respect. It's a matter of honor. It is a great chivalric value. So this is when the assault was intended to the city, and I hope that you have understood the sonnet, you have enjoyed it, and I thank you all for listening to me and watching the video. Thank you.